I'm reading today from Rays of the One Light. These are Bible and Gita commentaries written by Swami Kriyananda and based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Today's subject is Dogmatism versus Common Sense. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, Jesus warns, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorns or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree brings forth corrupt fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, nor can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them." Jesus here, as indeed many times during his teachings, counsels people to use their God-given common sense and not to rely on high-flown but undemonstrable claims. Common sense goes beyond abstract reason, for it is rooted in actual experience. Even common sense, however, is deficient when the judgment goes beyond sensory experience. Ultimately, what he emphasized always, therefore, was intuitive perception. Thus, he expected more of his disciples than crude common sense, and often scolded them for being too literal-minded, as he did elsewhere when they thought his statement, "I have meat ye know not of," meant that he had sandwiches secreted on his person. His reference, of course, was to spiritual, not material substance. Words, even though appearing in the scriptures, are no substitute for direct perception of truth. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita states, "The sage who knows God has as little need for the scriptures as one might have for a pond when the whole land is covered in flood." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. The chairs got set up very far away today. I feel like you're in the next county. James Audubon, the founder of the Audubon Society of Birdwatchers, had a statement that's often quoted. He said, "When the bird differs from the book, believe the bird." And that reminds me a little bit of this reading, because the scriptures help us. They are a love letter from God. They are messages to us directly, personally, today from God. We can open them and they speak to us with love, with joy. They are an important part of our lives, especially our spiritual lives. They give guidance that get to know the scriptures, but they are no substitute for direct personal experience. The teachings can talk all about how breathlessness is deathlessness. So we are working towards breathlessness. And we read about what it's like. Yogananda in the chapter of the autobiography talks about the air being sucked from his lungs like with a huge magnet, he said, just drawing the breath out of his body. So we read these things, and then we go have lunch. We think, oh yeah, well maybe someday. But if we get a little taste of breathlessness, just through our Hong Sa practice, the pauses in between the breaths grow longer and longer. And we start to enjoy that breathlessness. Even a little taste of it brings so much joy that it's an amazing experience. But we don't get that from the scriptures, from the descriptions, any more than when we see the actual bird. Beautiful, chirping and singing, alive, vibrating with energy and joy, rather than a book, just a picture in a book. So what we have to do is make our religion, our spirituality living, breathing, and not just from a book. The books help. It's really important. But like Jesus says, we have to experience. We have to use the scientific method. Here's Jesus, thousands of years ago, saying, observe. Look. What are the fruits of these teachings or those teachings? What are the people doing? How do you experience the people? What is the fruit of that teaching? And then observe and decide what you think. Our path is not a path of blind belief, where you just swear an oath and sign on the dotted line and that's it. Or as we used to joke in the early days of Ananda, chant Om 3 times and that's it. No, it's a daily practice. And that's why Ananda is such a blessing, because we're all in this together. All the thousands of people around the world who are part of this movement of Yoganandas, it's not based on blind belief, it's based on experimentation. And we get to live together, and so we see what works and what doesn't work. And we learn from each other's mistakes, we learn from each other's wisdom. I remember recently, I guess it was during the summer, a friend of mine was giving a talk at Ananda Village and I was there. And I know what he's going through in his life. You know, he's had to take care of a relative who was very ill, and then that relative passed away, and now he has another relative that he's taking care of. Meanwhile, he has a very demanding job. And I've always perceived that this person was very intellectual, brilliant, but in his head. When I saw him give that talk, it was so moving to me because he was so in his heart. Just like the affirmation today was talking about, everything that happens to us is a gift. Doesn't seem like it. Seems like, my God, why are you doing this to me? But everything is a gift. All of our circumstances are tailor-made just for us. We used to live in India and had the blessing of having our clothes tailored. You just go into a shop and pick out the blue fabric, and they make it just so that it fits you. So different than just clothes off the rack. That's how our lives are. Our lives have been tailor-made with love from God, saying this is what you need to learn so that you can grow in joy, so that you can grow in wisdom. Yogananda, as I said, I was reading the chapter, An Experience in Cosmic Consciousness. And you'll remember this story. He's just returned to Sri Yukteswar's ashram, and he, is very humbled and says, basically, Master, I hope I didn't inconvenience you by leaving all my duties and running off to the Himalayas. And Sri Yukteswar, with no negative emotion at all, he says, I don't want anything from you except your own highest good. Nothing you can do can change our relationship, basically, is what he's saying. It's unconditional love. And then he takes him into the kitchen, let's get something to eat. Just loving Father. And then a few days later, Yogananda's trying to meditate. He's gone into Sri Yukteswar's private area where he's meditating. He has permission to do that. And he hears Sri Yukteswar calling him. And meanwhile, his thoughts, he said, are like birds scattered before the hunter. His mind is everywhere. And so he doesn't answer Sri Yukteswar. He says to himself, he knows why I came here. I'm trying to meditate. And so Sri Yukteswar calls him again. And Yogananda is obstinately silent. And then he calls him a third time. And this time his voice holds rebuke, Master said. So Master shouts out, Sir, I am meditating. And Sri Yukteswar says, I know how you are meditating. Your thoughts distributed like leaves in the storm. Come here to me. And I love Yogananda says, snubbed and exposed. Snubbed and exposed. Sadly went to Sri Yukteswar. And that was the moment that Yogananda had been waiting his whole life for. That was the moment that Sri Yukteswar tapped him over the heart very gently. And Yogananda went into cosmic consciousness. And he goes on to talk about how he realized that it was his restless thoughts and his breath that were keeping him from that stillness to be able to perceive. And that's another one. We read that in the Bible. Be still and know that I am God. Okay, sounds good. Stillness, what does that mean? It means stilling the breath. Breathlessness, stilling the mind, stilling all those birds scattered before the hunter, those leaves distributed in the storm. It means perfect focus, concentration, and stillness. And Yogananda goes on to say that once he realized that and started to be able to do it through his Guru's grace, daily he could go into that state of realizing God as one light. Everything in this world as light. So that's the state that we're trying to find, that we're trying to become still enough to go into. It's always there. It's always waiting. God is always waiting for us. We just have to do the work. And everything in our lives right now is that work. We can't reject any of it. We need to say, thank you, help me learn from this, so we can move on and be free. So the scriptures help us. I know when I first read Autobiography of a Yogi, I could feel the truth in that book. I could feel Master's vibration. I was reading about all the miracles and all the saints and all the experiences of someone having Lahiri Mahashaya materialize in a cornfield on page 3. I just accepted all of it because I could feel the vibration. So we need to develop our intuitive perception, as this reading says, so that we can perceive that light that's emanating from the scriptures and absorb ourselves in that and practice what they say so that we can experience that light, that joy, that calmness and freedom. And we also need to take advantage of living scriptures, the people who have gone deeply into them and they have that vibration. I remember a time when, this was in the early 90s, and Dharmadas and I were working with Swami Kriyananda as part of the publishing company that he had for his books. And so I was doing graphic design, Dharmadas was doing typesetting and publishing. And at this one point, Swami was in Italy and we were in America. So we were just talking on the phone quite a bit. And we knew him well enough to know that he was really, really exhausted. And so we tightened our belts, even though we were just on an Ananda salary, which at the time was really not very much. We just decided that we were going to say, and we did say, Swamiji, we want to take you on vacation, and we'll take you anywhere in the world you want to go. I can't tell you what a huge step of faith that was, because we really didn't have any money to do this, but we had a credit card. So he was very touched. He knew our circumstances, but he said, you know, he's in Italy and Switzerland's not that far, so, and he loved Lugano. So he said, well, why don't you, no, it was Davos, which is not very far from Lugano. So he wanted to go there, and so we did it. And we had a beautiful time. I remember just wonderful experiences with him. Just the three of us. It was a priceless opportunity, no matter what the price tag was. And we got home, and you know, it was $5,000 or $6,000, which for us was enormous. But I was doing our finances at that time, and there was not a ripple. There was not a glitch. There was not any problem whatsoever. We paid all our bills. We didn't get any late charges. Everything worked beautifully like that. And I still don't understand how it happened. But it was God. I think probably, you know how the credit card cycle comes around at a certain moment? I think it all just worked out perfectly, and we were able to do it. But again, that's God. Everything is God. So I invite you to take this opportunity to be with people, be with Ananda people, come to the kirtans, come to the programs. Jyotish and Devi, we've moved heaven and earth to get them to come on the weekend of March 18th and 19th. Take advantage of being in their presence. These are the souls that Master gave to Swami, and Swami gave to us to continue the work of Ananda. And we've had the blessing of knowing them all our lives at Ananda. And they are very dear people, very down to earth, great sense of humor, and very, very deep. So do what you can to make that happen in your life. Be with those people who inspire you. Be in their presence, not just watching them on TV. Be there in that vibration. And remember that stilling the thoughts, stilling the breath will lead you to your heart's desire, just like Yogananda had longed for that experience all of his life. And that's how he achieved it, through the grace of the Guru. So prepare yourself. This is what we're doing now. We're practicing meditation. We're not really meditating yet. We're practicing. What Yogananda experienced was meditation. So we have to practice so that we are ready to take the liberating shock of omnipresence, as Yogananda put it. So let's get ready for that.
Again, you can keep it up here now. Keep it, it's okay. Yeah. As Nirmala was talking just now, the pairing of the affirmation and the reading I'm gonna take this thing off, is not always obvious. Forgiveness and dogmatism versus common sense. It's not it's a little bit of a Zen koan this particular time. And as she was speaking, it dawned on me why the two are paired together. And one of the reasons why. And one of the reasons why, according to me, is that without intuitive perception, the things that happen to us do not seem to be for our good. Not all of them anyway. I mean, winning the lottery ticket, okay, yeah, maybe that seems like it's good. It actually, for many people, it ends up being a complete disaster. But things that seem disastrous are actually beneficial from the perception of intuitive insight. And that's how we have to develop and grow. In this reading, Swamiji mentions the Christ saying to the disciples, I have meat to eat that you know not of, and he scolds them. I went to that passage, and it's a fascinating passage because Christ is in Samaria. He must needs go through Samaria. And so he's got this trip through Samaria to get back to Israel. And he goes to Jacob's well, and that's where this all takes place. And he meets the woman of Samaria who comes, and they have this discussion. And she's pretty surprised. She goes to draw water, and he's sitting there. And she's surprised that he would speak to her at all, because the Jewish culture and Sumerians had no connection and didn't relate to each other. And now it's interesting to speculate how she knew he was Jewish. Presumably it was what he was wearing or something, or maybe she just knew everyone in the area and he wasn't from that area, so therefore he had to be Jewish. It's not made clear. But they have this discussion, and he talks about living water and how he's going to give her living water. And Yogananda, in a commentary about this, talks about how Christ recognized her from another lifetime, which means he knew who she was before she was even born in this lifetime, and was rekindling her connection to the spiritual life, which had gone a little off. And he asks her a question. He says, bring your husband. And she says, I have no husband. And he says, you spoke the truth, because you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with right now also isn't your husband. And she's a little taken aback by this, because he's sort of telling her life story to her without ever having met her, seemingly. But that is intuitive perception. And then she goes away to gather the people of the town, because in this little encounter, he actually identifies himself as the Messiah, because she talks about, we hear that a Messiah is going to come, and he actually speaks those words. Who speaks these words to you is that Messiah. But she goes off to gather the people of the town. Meanwhile, the disciples come back. They've been buying food. And that's when this, I have meat to eat ye know not of. And they're like, well, did somebody bring you something? I mean, they literally ask among themselves, and it's like, that's when he says it. And then he goes on to say that his sustenance is doing the will of the Father, doing the will of him who sent him, and accomplishing his work, accomplishing his mission. And it's interesting because, in fact, Swamiji wrote a song, and I'm going to sing it for you now that we're on the topic. But that little encounter, there is so much in it. There is so much happening. It's like it's all compressed, and there's multiple layers. There's the fact that he's recognizing her. Well, he doesn't tell that to the disciples, or at least it's not recorded that way if he does. It's on a need-to-know basis. They didn't particularly need to know at that moment that he recognized her from another lifetime. But he's talking about living water and giving her that living water, and giving all of us, by extension, that living water. I'm just going to sing the introduction to this. This is a song that Swamiji wrote for his oratorio, Christ Lives, and it goes on to a choir part, but the introduction is beautiful. He who would slake his thirst now and forever, let him not fill his cup here from this well. From living water, sipped in the silence, in spirit and in truth, break ego's spell. And then the song goes on to share how, in a sense, all of us have lived this drama of going off into the woods, falling deep in sin and feeling abandoned by the world, and then he can redeem you. And that power, that grace, the same grace that Nirmala was referring to with Sri Yukteswar, touching Master over the heart and giving him the experience of cosmic consciousness, that grace is always available to us. We have to be turned towards it. We have to be open to it. We have to be trying to work in cooperation with it. But it is always available to us. Earlier, the Bible passage that Swamiji is referring to, beware of false prophets coming to you in sheep's clothing, tum-ty-tum. That all, I don't know, I grew up in the Christian tradition, and I remember reading that passage, and, and it was like, it has this beautiful explanation in the way that Swamiji gives it to us today. But back in my youth when we read that, it was kind of like this flashing neon light, beware of false prophets. And it reminds me of something that, this is another experience from our lives in India. Nirmala had a role in India, which she was very proud of. I was
the warden of
Gurgaon.
Yes.
She was the warden of Gurgaon. This was an official title given by the U.S. Embassy in Delhi, and which the reason we chuckle about it is because it meant absolutely nothing.
It meant something.
But in theory, it could have meant something if there had been a big disaster and people needed to be notified, and etc. Anyway, she was the warden of Gurgaon. But the reason I bring this slightly ridiculous part of our history up is that in the correspondence, every so often, every few weeks, every few months, a letter would come out talking about, the situation in India, particularly from a security standpoint for U.S. citizens. Inevitably, in that text, were the words, maintain situational awareness. And that's what beware of false prophets means. Maintain situational awareness. Pay attention. Use your God-given common sense and watch. And I'll also segue onto what Nirmala was saying about living in community and how you get to see the results of what happens month by month, year by year, decade by decade. And you see, and of course, being, given that you have hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people involved, you're going to see some people make some bad choices. And you'll get to see the results of those choices. You're also going to see some people make heroic sacrifices and exercise incredible devotion and generosity, and you get to see the results of that as well. And it is amazing. And so he's saying, observe, pay attention, watch. Interestingly, he is not saying, nobody any good but me. He's saying, just watch. Because the ones, I'll share an experience that Swamiji shared with us. In India, there are a number of other spiritual traditions that are well established and well respected. And one of them is the Shivananda group based in Rishikesh. Swami Shivananda was the head of it, the Divine Life Society. And our Swamiji was younger than Swami Shivananda and only met him, I believe, once and briefly. Swamiji was in the Rishikesh area to take seclusion in the late 50s or early 60s. And his comment was that when he met Swami Shivananda, he was not particularly impressed, or he was not sort of overwhelmed or anything like that. But then he went on to say, but then I met his disciples. And he said they were very saintly. He said, that's how I knew that this was a great soul. I met his disciples, and they had something. And that something had to come from him. It didn't just come out of the clear blue sky. It came through that channel. It came from that instrument. And so you look at different groups, and if it's all focused on one person and it never sort of extends beyond, and it often is the case that there will be someone who has a divine experience and a group forms around that person. And there's all this energy and commotion and magnetism, and sometimes it extends out to thousands and even millions of people. But you look around and you see, okay, how far does the light extend? How deeply, profoundly does it reach into those souls and change them? Because they should be glowing. They should be illuminated from within. And when you see that, then you know you have something. So he's just saying, pay attention. And in our lives, Swamiji and Master are giving us the challenge, the assignment. Also, go deeper than common sense. Actually perceive the truth. This Bhagavad Gita saying reminds me of what it looks like in the monsoon in India, which is, it's just nothing but rain sometimes. I mean, there are times when you can't even go from your front door to the door of the car without being absolutely drenched, unless you have an umbrella, and even then you may still get drenched because the wind is blowing and the rain is coming sideways and it's just everywhere. Well, we sort of have the snow version of the monsoon happening up in Lake Tahoe area and other parts of California where there's 12 and 20 and 30 feet of snow. How much need do we have of the scripture when, like a pond, the need for a pond when the whole land is in flood, or the need for a snow cone when you have, 30 feet of snow in the mountains? You don't have much need for it because you become that scripture. It reminds me of the little story of St. Francis meeting a leper, and the leper was asking him for something, and he didn't have anything to give him, but he did have his little Bible, which was very precious to him, and he gave it. And afterwards, he was sorry, and he said to God, now what will I do? I've given away your word. And that's when he felt the answer come, my word is written in your heart now. And that's what we need. We need to have the perception written in our hearts. Then it can never be taken away. Then we can always give it away and we will never lose it. And so feel that power. Every time we meditate, we offer ourselves. And guess what? There are going to be those times when our meditation looks like leaves scattered before the wind. And, and we may feel terrible. Oh, I can't meditate, my mind is just everywhere. And we just have to try again, because sooner or later the call from our Sri Yukteswar is going to come, perhaps with rebuke, and we get snubbed and exposed and we go tromping down the stairs. But somewhere along the way that touch comes. And just this week I was reading an article which had the title, How to Be Happy. I thought, all right, I'm going to give you guys a try here. How to be happy, period. And what is the article? The article is talking about awe, A-W-E. Having the experience of being in awe, often, like daily, like several times per day. That is how you be happy. Be in awe. That is what the experience, and it can happen anytime. It can happen, it happened for Ramakrishna seeing birds against the sky. I mean, it can happen to any of us at any time. Always be ready for that experience, because it will come.